Welcome, viewers, and thank you for joining us again on Gemstone Kingdom. Some stones were never meant to shine. They were minted, not mined, used not for trade but to sign wars, coronations, or death warrants. You won't find them in jewelry stores. You'll find them in fallen archives, broken palaces, or sealed chambers that no longer serve a government. Most people never hear about these stones because they don't glitter. They dictate. And when an empire ends, they either vanish or change everything. Welcome back to Gemstone Kingdom. If this is your first time here, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. Today we trace 10 gemstones that didn't just survive history, they shifted with it. Top 10. Aztec Fire Opals, the stones that burned without flame. The soil was darker than expected. Beneath the basalt ridge, once believed to mark the boundary of a lost Aztec ceremonial site, archaeologists found a pit, no wider than a man's arm span and no deeper than a shallow grave. Inside were no gold masks, no jade breastplates, no obsidian blades. Instead, a ring of rough stones, warm to the eye. They weren't polished, they weren't cut, but each shimmered orange from within, with streaks of red like congealed magma trapped in glass. For weeks, no one logged them as gemstones. Their value wasn't in weight. It lacked clarity and brilliance. Only later, when matched against 16th century Spanish cargo lists and codices, did the stones reveal their role. Quetzalcoatl, fire opal, a sacred material not mined for commerce, but prepared for ritual combustion. Fire opals in Aztec culture weren't merely decorative. They were time markers, assigned to solstice rites, volcanic cycles, and royal lineage renewal, carried by priest kings, buried during transitions of power, never sold, never traded. Their energy wasn't cut into shape. It was preserved whole. When Hernan Cortés invaded Tenochtitlan in 1519 and the Aztec Empire collapsed 2 years later, Spain stripped what could be measured in carats and coinage. Fire opals were not among them. They were deemed fragile, too soft, too warm, not worthy of the mint. Some were taken as curiosities, others discarded. Many were lost in fire or flood. For centuries, fire opals' place in Aztec cosmology disappeared. The god Xiuhtecutli, once honored in pyres lit with opal ash, became a footnote. Stones that once marked the passage of time became paperweights, jewelry trinkets, and museum mislabels. It wasn't until mineralogists in 1889, tracing the geochemistry of silica-rich volcanic zones in Mexico, rediscovered the fire opal's actual structure, and more importantly, its spiritual context. By then, the empire that birthed it was 5 generations forgotten. Today, Aztec fire opals can fetch up to $500 to $3,000 per carat, depending on translucency and saturation, especially in cabochon form, as they were once worn in ritual. But no auction catalog mentions what they used to be. Stones of memory, of offering, of flame without fire. What changed wasn't the gem. What changed was the empire. Top 9. Lapis Lazuli from the Sumerian temples. The courtyard is quiet now. Wind carves lines into the dust, tracing what was once a ziggurat staircase. At the edge of the lowest platform, archaeologists uncovered a pattern of scorched bricks, not from fire, but from weight. Lapis, shards, chips, pigment residue. And in one cavity, a cylindrical seal, no longer intact, but still blue. Too blue to ignore. 6,000 years ago, no local rock in Sumer could have produced that color. No dye, no paste, no substitute. It came from the northeast, the Sarisang mines of Badakhshan, modern-day Afghanistan. Hand-carried, trade-worn, through river valleys and mountain passes, into the southern cities of Eridu, Ur, and Nippur. But it wasn't sold. It wasn't traded at market stalls. It never reached the hands of ordinary Sumerians. Lapis lazuli was reserved. Its presence in temple inventories, recorded on baked clay tablets, was minimal in number, but exceptional in placement. 1 stone for Inanna. 1 cylinder seal for the priest of Nana. 1 pigment preparation for the boundary lines of the sacred shrine floor. And when those items aged out of use, they were not discarded. They were buried beneath the temple as part of the foundation rite, so the gods would continue to receive light through the stone even after the priest had passed. Lapis was never a decoration. It was functioning theology. But then came 2004 BCE. The Sumerian heartland had already fractured into city-states vying for power. The Elamite armies crossed the Tigris, looted Ur, and decapitated what was left of a once cohesive religious and political system. Temples weren't just toppled, they were left unstaffed. Priests fled, scribes were lost. The caravans stopped. Lapis Lazuli, which had once moved through hands like sacred relics, vanished from the temples entirely. Its use didn't stop, but its meaning collapsed. By 1700 BCE, under Babylonian consolidation, the same stone began appearing again, but now as jewelry, bracelets, inlays, cosmetic containers. The blue was still there, the brilliance remained, but the purpose had shifted beyond recognition. Even the pigment preparation, once used for sacred inscriptions and divine murals, was crushed more finely, diluted, and applied to the walls of private homes. A material once used to speak to gods was now used to decorate the walls of men. Today, untreated lapis lazuli from historical sources, especially Sumerian period fragments, rarely come to auction. But when they do, the price is rarely driven by purity or carat. It's driven by provenance. Pieces traceable to Ur or Eridu have been known to reach $10,000 to $50,000, even in fragmentary form. Not because of beauty, but because of what they stopped being. The Sumerians didn't lose lapis. They lost the grammar that gave it structure. The gods were silent, the temples emptied, and the stone no longer needed to mean anything. Top 8th Macedonian emerald from the royal tombs. 4 slabs of marble sealed the chamber. Behind them, a casket of gold, untouched since the 4th century BCE. Inside, fragments of armor were scorched, a ceremonial shield, a filigree crown, and near the base of the spine, caught in the weave of burial cloth. 1 emerald. It wasn't local, it wasn't from Greece, and it didn't belong to a mere noble. The tomb, discovered in 1977 beneath the ancient city of Aigai, modern-day Virginia, is widely believed to be that of Philip II of Macedon, father to Alexander the Great. The emerald wasn't cut in Greek style, it wasn't rounded, it wasn't polished flat. It bore the angular facets of Egyptian lapidary, most likely extracted from the Sakite mines near the Red Sea. So why was it buried in the royal tomb of a northern Greek king? Because at that moment, emerald didn't just mean beauty, it meant dominion. When Alexander conquered Egypt in 332 BCE, he claimed more than cities, he absorbed symbols. The emerald, long sacred in Egyptian iconography, became his marker of legitimacy. From the Nile to the Indus, it was worn by satraps and generals as a signal of alignment with the center of power. Emeralds entered Macedonia not as a form of trade, but as a declaration. Not adornment, but absorption. But the stone's meaning didn't last. Within a year of Alexander's death in 323 BCE, the empire fractured. The Diadochi Wars redrew borders. Each general took pieces, not just of territory but of symbols. By 300 BCE, emeralds still appeared in the courts of Seleucus and Ptolemy, but no longer as a unifying standard. Now each fragment of the empire had its language, its stone hierarchy. In Alexandria, emerald was repurposed as a luxury for queens. In Pergamon, it became a gift between rival elites. Its function drifted until its original claim, as a banner of world rule, dissolved. Today, emeralds linked to the royal Macedonian tombs rarely surface. When they do, they aren't appraised for color grade or clarity. They're examined for context. Funerary textiles, burial depth, and gold leaf composition. An emerald without context is valuable, but one with empire behind it reveals what happens when symbolism outlives sovereignty. Top 7. Imperial Topaz from the Portuguese crown. It once belonged to a queen. Set into a brooch framed with diamonds, the center stone measured 22.6 carats. Radiant, elongated, unheated. Its color, a deep honey orange with flashes of scarlet. Not yellow, not pink, not replicable. The record listed as part of a bridal dowry issued in Lisbon, 1807, but by 1835, it reappeared in a private estate sale in Paris. The monarchy still existed. The title still stood. But the stone no longer needed a crown. Imperial Topaz didn't get its name by accident. In late 18th century Portugal, when stones from Minas Gerais began arriving in European ports, most were pale, golden or faintly brown. But the red-orange topaz, the vivid ones from Ouro Preto's most profound veins, were different. They were restricted. By royal decree, only the monarch and select bloodline bearers could wear stones of that hue. Export was illegal without crown approval. Ownership by commoners was scandalous. It wasn't just a gem. It was a line in society drawn in color. That line vanished after 1822. When Brazil declared independence, the Portuguese crown lost its richest territory, but it also lost control of the mines and the gems. Over the next decade, dozens of stones previously registered to Lisbon's House of Braganza disappeared from court records. Some were smuggled. Displaced nobles quietly sold others. Auction ledgers from Paris and Antwerp record the shift. Jewels labeled as Imperial Topaz, formerly of Portugal, began to show up in private collections. No law stopped them anymore. No lineage validated them. The stone remained the same, but the power behind it dissolved. Today, natural, untreated Imperial Topaz from Ouro Preto still commands high prices, especially when linked to 18th to 19th century provenance. Well-documented royal pieces can exceed $150,000 for stones above 20 carats. But unlike rubies or sapphires, its value doesn't rest on hardness or hue alone. It rests on what it once represented, a line of permission that no longer exists. Top 6. Spinel of the Delhi Sultanate. It wasn't just a red gemstone. It had a name, carved directly into the surface. Sultan Firuz Shah, it read in fine Arabic script, not once but 3 times, on the front, back, and girdle. The stone weighed over 180 carats, not cabochon, not faceted, a domed oval, blood red and untreated. The color of imperial decree. Spinels from Badakhshan had been flowing through trade routes since the 12th century. But during the reign of the Delhi Sultans, they became more than an ornament. They were message stones, stamped not with royal crests, but royal names. Each spinel bore the identity of its ruler, the weight of divine right. For the sultans, this wasn't vanity, it was permanence, a way to embed lineage into the material world, resistant to decay, erosion, and history's edits, until 1526. That year, Babur, a descendant of Timur, marched from Central Asia and founded the Mughal Empire. The Sultanate fractured, and its elite fled or surrendered. But their gemstones did not flee. They were captured, catalogued, then erased. Court records from the early Mughal period describe a strange practice. Red spinels with engraved names were ground down or recut. The names of defeated rulers were polished out. In some cases, stones were set into weapons, not to honor, but to dominate what they once represented. One record notes a spinel that survived. Buried in the foundation of a shrine near Fatehpur Sikri, it was unearthed in the 20th century during a structural survey. The name, Mahmud Khalji. The date, 1459. The surface, worn but legible. It hadn't been recut, just hidden. Today, spinels from this era occasionally surface in museum auctions, few bearing inscriptions. Those that do are often valued less for their clarity or color and more for what they endured. A flawless spinel from this lineage might command $300,000 plus today. But one with a sultan's name still intact? Priceless and politically volatile. Spinel didn't fall from favor. It fell from the narrative. Its color is too bold to erase. It's too dangerous to keep. Top 5. Garnet of the Austro-Hungarian court. In a sealed archive beneath Vienna's Hofburg Palace, a hair brooch was found. Gold filigree, 5 rose-cut garnets, a lock of hair from 1852. The back is engraved with a name, Archduchess Sophie. The brooch wasn't rare, not by weight. The garnets were no more than half a carat each, deep crimson, cut shallow, faceted flat. What mattered wasn't the carat, it was the context. For over a century, Bohemian garnet adorned the court of the Habsburgs. Unlike diamonds or rubies reserved for coronation, garnets were daily stones, seen on lapels, belts, buttons, and mourning pins. From Prague to Trieste, they signified order, lineage, and restraint. It wasn't just fashion. Bohemian garnet represented the crown's connection to its territories. Extracted from the very lands of the empire, processed by Czech hands, sold under Austrian trade, garnet was more than mineral. It was imperial cohesion in tangible form. But in 1918, the empire fractured. Hungary declared independence. Czechoslovakia formed overnight. The monarchy fell. And with it, so did the garnet. In the new republics, garnet lost its role. No longer a court symbol, it became a tourist souvenir. Factories that once made regalia began producing brooches for foreign travelers. The royal archives were auctioned off. Even the styles changed, from reserved clusters to Art Deco reinterpretations stripped of heraldry. By the 1930s, few remembered that garnet had once meant power. Only the stones remained, faceted and reused, no longer carrying a flag. Some were melted down. Others made their way into pawn shops in Paris, Zurich, and New York. One museum curator noted, "It's the only gemstone whose value dropped because the country behind it no longer existed." Today, Bohemian garnet remains commercially available, but imperial-era pieces, if intact, are rare. A 19th century Habsburg garnet set, with provenance can command $10,000 to $20,000, but not for the gem's rarity, rather for the regime it once upheld. Garnet didn't disappear, but everything it once stood for did. Top fourth amber of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. A merchant's chest opened in Königsberg, 1804. Inside, amber beads, once strung for a voivode's daughter, now separated by weight, polished for sale, no tag, no lineage. Each bead, a price, not a name. For over 2 centuries, amber from the Baltic shores wasn't just traded, it was controlled. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a sprawling union across what is now Poland, Lithuania, Belarus, and Ukraine, ruled the coastline that mattered most, the Amber Coast. Amber was declared regalia, property of the crown. It could not be picked, sold, or shaped without royal license. Violators were branded. Entire communities were surveilled. The state's hold on resin was not economic. It was existential. In an empire where noble privilege defined survival, amber became both ornament and weapon. It adorned Catholic bishops. It sealed royal documents. It bought mercenaries. And through it, the Commonwealth's authority touched every port and pilgrimage across Eastern Europe. But in 1772, the borders cracked. By 1795, the Commonwealth was gone. Prussia, Austria, Russia. 3 empires divided the land and the region. The amber rooms of the czars were built from what used to be contraband. Prussian collectors flooded the market with what had once been state secrets. And merchants along the Vistula began unstringing centuries of ownership, reshaping amber into mass-produced rosaries, hairpins, and brooches for buyers who no longer knew what it meant. For a brief time, the stone lost its past. Today, Baltic amber remains abundant. You can buy it in Gdańsk, Vilnius, or Kaliningrad. A strand of antique, Commonwealth-era amber, verified and complete, may fetch $5,000 to $12,000. But most have been disassembled, sold bead by bead, each severed from its origin. Amber didn't vanish, but the system that made it sacred did. Top 3. Fluorite seal of the Tang Dynasty. Unearthed in Luoyang in 2004, a translucent purple fluorite seal, inscribed with 5 characters and silence. The Tang Dynasty ruled from the 7th to the 10th century, unifying vast regions of East Asia through bureaucracy, military strength, and ritual. Power was not just spoken, it was stamped, with seals. Most were carved in jade or soapstone, but some bore a rarer signature, fluorite. Easy to shape, visibly luminous in candlelight. Assigned to officials managing border provinces, regions where terrain blurred the lines between loyalty and rebellion. These weren't imperial seals. They were delegations of power, carved in soft stone, meant to authenticate land deeds, tax orders, and religious exemptions. When used, the seal transferred not just ink, but legitimacy. By 874 CE, the Tang state was hemorrhaging. Peasant uprisings, private armies, governors are refusing central command. The emperor's name stopped appearing on local decrees. Instead, regional lords reached for whatever seal was left, fluorite, soapstone, copper, and ruled as if authorized. But when the dynasty collapsed in 907, those seals changed overnight. They no longer validated, they incriminated. In many provinces, carrying a Tang-era seal meant affiliation with a vanished state. Collectors buried them. Officials destroyed them. In some cases, they were stripped of inscriptions, recarved into amulets or chess pieces. The Luoyang seal survived, but it cannot function. It cannot legitimize. Its inscription no longer holds rank. Its color no longer distinguishes the hand of law. It glows under UV light, but not in ritual. Today, a Tang fluorite seal, authenticated, complete, would be valued between $40,000 and $85,000 at private auctions in Hong Kong or Tokyo, but only as an artifact, not as an authority. The empire that gave it power no longer exists, and without that system, the seal is just stone. Top 2. Pearl of the Mughal Treasury. Aurangzeb's portrait from 1701 shows no crown, just a single pearl descending from his turban, not for fashion, for authority. Among the Mughal emperors, pearls were never ornaments. They were theology, a white drop from the sea chosen for its flawlessness, worn not to seduce but to signify dominion under divine law. This particular pearl, oval-shaped and radiant under dusk light, once hung at the center of the Mughal treasury, roughly 25 millimeters long, harvested from the Arabian Sea, mounted with uncut diamonds. It didn't belong to a person, it belonged to the empire. That empire began to rupture after Aurangzeb's death. Multiple sons declared themselves heirs. Border regions seceded. Tax caravans were ambushed not by outsiders, but by rival governors. By 1739, the center no longer held. Nader Shah of Persia crossed the Indus with 150,000 men. He entered Delhi. No city defense, no imperial army. What he found was not just loot, but symbolic collapse. The Koh-i-Noor, the peacock throne, and this pearl, taken, recontextualized, stripped of all meaning. In Persian records, the pearl reappears briefly in a crown plan that was never realized, then vanishes. Some claim it reemerged in the Qajar court. Others say it was traded, uncut, in Constantinople during the Tanzimat reforms. Wherever it went, it was no longer Mughal. The theology was gone. The law behind it was revoked. What remained was nacre and silence. Today, a natural saltwater pearl of similar size and provenance could sell for $3 to $6 million. But its highest value lies not in auction, but in how it fell. From the head of the empire to the bottom of a Persian chest, a drop detached from the divine. Top 1. Jade Seal of the Qin Emperor. The ceremony required no witnesses, just one man kneeling. A square block of white jade was placed in his hands. 9 dragons are carved along its edges, and a phrase etched underneath. Received from heaven, long may it prosper. That's all it took. He was no longer just Qin Shi Huang. He was the first emperor of China. The imperial jade seal wasn't designed for aesthetics. It wasn't jewelry. It was mandate materialized, a relic forged from He Shi Bi, the most coveted jade of the Warring States era, cut and sanctioned by imperial command in 221 BC. Every dynasty that followed sought this seal. Han generals killed for it. Tang emperors enshrined it. Ming scholars debated whether its absence meant their rule was invalid. But power doesn't stay in stone. When the Qin Empire fell in 206 BC, the seal didn't vanish. It passed between hands, from rebels to generals, from regents to usurpers. For nearly 9 centuries, the seal resurfaced whenever legitimacy was in question, until it didn't. Around 960 AD, during the chaotic Five Dynasties period, the seal disappeared. No record of destruction, no claim of possession, just gone. What happened next was more revealing than its loss. China didn't collapse, it reorganized. New dynasties rose, Song, Yuan, Ming, without the seal. Jade no longer defined legitimacy. It was now shaped by lineage, governance, and conquest. The seal's disappearance didn't end power, it freed it. Historians have searched for it. Treasure hunters have tried. If it resurfaced today, it could command $20 to $50 million, though no museum could price what it meant to one of the world's longest political continuities. But its actual value lies elsewhere, not in Jade, but in fact, power was adapted when Jade no longer answered. Empires fall, but not everything they touch disappears. Some gemstones lost their purpose. Others were redefined. A few quietly vanished, carrying authority with them. What remains are objects, but behind them, new governments, rewritten borders, and the silent reshaping of power. This was the top 10 gemstones that changed when empires fell. If you're seeing us for the first time, feel free to subscribe and turn on the bell for upcoming stories. Each stone tells a different part of history, and we're not done uncovering them. Until next time, thank you for watching Gemstone Kingdom.